Hi, this is the Baseless Speculation Podcast with Spartacus and Dylan. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about folding devices. Recently in Mobile World Congress 2019, quite a few folding devices all got announced. And so we went from having no folding devices to having quite a few different devices. They use quite a few different varieties of designs. There's a lot to look at. Here at Baseless Speculation, we generally agree that the industry is going to eventually consolidate towards using these folding devices. They're going to be the future in 10 years. Everybody's going to have one. And by that time, in that long future, we're probably going to be consolidating down to one common design for folding devices. Unlike what we have today, which is a variety of designs. Where we don't really agree here at Baseless Speculation is what that consolidated design is going to be. And so we think there's going to be two devices that have been announced that really embody those designs. Dylan, why don't you talk a bit about those two devices?
So there is the Samsung Galaxy Fold and the Huawei Mate X. They are the two largest, Samsung and Huawei are the two largest phone companies in the world, and they made two radically different designs. So the Samsung Galaxy Fold folds inwards, sort of like a pita bread or something, and the Huawei Mate X folds outwards. So the screens are always visible on it. So with the Galaxy Fold, they've actually got multiple camera arrays on the device. They actually have 3 different camera arrays. And the Huawei Mate X has a single camera array that's embedded inside this deep bar. There's a reason they went with these two designs. The Mate X definitely looks better, and the Galaxy Fold, in my opinion, is much more practical, sturdy, and mature.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other things to kind of break down with this. As you said, the key difference is that one folds inwards like a book, and the other folds outwards, where the screen is always visible. One of the things that is a big difference with that folding design is when your device folds outwards. When it's folded, you can see the screen. And so you're not going to need any kind of additional screen. You've got one single screen that can work both in folded mode as well as unfolded mode. One of the unfortunate side effects of how Samsung did it with the Galaxy Fold is they actually need a second screen that's smaller, a more traditional aspect ratio of a screen that can be used when the device is folded together.
Likewise, there's a compromise on the other side where, well, you have this folding device and you can't make that screen, what lays on top of the screen, out of glass. That's just not possible. So you have to use something that is also just as flexible as that OLED panel, which in this case for both devices is some sort of plastic material. So with the Huawei Mate X, that plastic material is always exposed to the rough outside world, and that means it's going to get scratched. The Galaxy Fold is not always exposed to the outside world, and so that traditional screen on the outside is the one that's going to be facing the wear and tear. That's the one that's going to have sand rubbing against it or anything else rubbing up against it. And that exterior is made out of glass. It's only the interior screens that have that soft plastic.
Yeah, and my perspective is that long term, the design that's going to win out amongst these two is going to be the one that Huawei chose with the Mate X. Whereas Dylan, you were kind of saying, hey, the Samsung style of folding inwards and all of the additional design choices that surround that is going to be the design that kind of wins out in the long term with these folding devices. And there's
Exactly. There's the only way that I see the Mate style winning out in the future is if we have a material science breakthrough, right? There's currently no material in the world that is flexible and high on hardness. Whereas with with current material science, we can make devices that have the soft inside that folds, and then the exterior, which is resistant to, your day-to-day wear and tear.
Yeah, that's certainly the big key issue. I would say that the advantages of the Huawei style are so great that even if we don't have that kind of a breakthrough, and plastics improve at a more iterative pace, then I think it's still going to be worth it. One of the things that you mentioned, Dylan, was the camera array. Whereas Huawei has one camera array, and Samsung is forced to use three. And so Samsung, just to count it down for everybody, when you're looking at the device in folded mode, they've got a camera right by the smaller secondary display as kind of a selfie cam. They've also got a camera opposite that on the face of the device that doesn't have any kind of screen. And then they've got a third camera array next to the large folding display. So when you've got the device folded, you've got a selfie cam. And so one thing to mention is, with these modern cameras, there's quite a few cameras that can be used in a given camera array. And so we're using the term camera array to describe the the cameras that are next to each other that are meant to function as one camera. So in fact, the Samsung Fold actually, I believe, has 6 cameras spread across 3 camera arrays. And so again, this contrasts with Huawei, which is able to consolidate everything into one camera array. They kind of put all of their eggs in one basket. And because they do that, they're going to end up being able to invest in a little bit better cameras, pound for pound. And then it also makes sense for them to use a bar. That's the term that they're using for a thicker area on the edge of one of the sides, where they've got the camera and a couple other I/O areas. And the interesting thing there is, because they've got that extra Z height, it's just a little bit thicker. That really pays some dividends for you when you talk about cameras and having extra space for those lenses and all sorts of the fun stuff that an engineer could explain to you with their additional understanding of optics. So that really benefits you quite a bit to be able to put your eggs in one basket, have a bunch of cameras, have them be really almost about twice as thick as what the Samsung Galaxy Fold can do. But Dylan, admittedly, there are a couple advantages to not having a bar. Why don't you talk a little bit about the consistent thickness and what comes with that?
With that thicker bar, when you fold it, put it in your pocket where it's going to get scratched because of this soft plastic, you also have something that isn't perfectly flat. You have something that's not a rectangle, a square, rectangular prism. It's more like almost like a trapezoid in your pocket. Not really, but it doesn't fold perfectly flat, and that's kind of not ergonomic in my opinion. The thing we want to distinguish, though, is that there's problems with these two current devices which don't apply to all future devices. For example, the Huawei Mate X style design could fold perfectly in the future. And the Galaxy Fold design doesn't have to have 3 camera arrays. I think it could do perfectly fine with 2 and even 1, but probably 2 it'd be perfectly fine with.
With, Dylan, you mentioned an interesting part where these devices are kind of a snapshot in time, and they don't always represent exactly what their respective designs can bring to the table. You mentioned that the Samsung Fold actually has 3 camera arrays. I agree. You could probably get away with 2. I think one's probably a little bit aggressive. I think you'd need 2 to really pull off a Samsung Fold style of device. And obviously, as the folding gets a little bit more advanced, we might see a little bit of some differences in how some of these devices fold. Are they always going to have to be, as you said, just a little bit more of a trapezoid style on like the Samsung Fold? Or, could they fold a little flatter? Probably. Um, and, but ultimately, one thing that's interesting that I have to hand it to the Galaxy Fold is that looking at some reviews and some write-ups on that device, it does appear to be the more mature device. It feels like it's had a little bit more time in the oven to become a more full-fledged product. It seems to be a little bit sturdier. One of the things that keeps getting mentioned is that the Huawei hinge feels a little bit more fragile. Again, it's hard to say whether this is inherent to each respective design or not, but if you ask me, I would say that the Galaxy Fold is a little less ambitious. And as a result of being a little less ambitious, Samsung is able to do certain things better. For example, the Huawei Mate X has 2 batteries for some reason, and Huawei does a fabulous job of um, talking up the advantages of that, and they claim that it charges a little bit quicker, which is technically possible. If you've got 2 batteries in parallel or 2 cells in parallel, and but functionally, in a heavily space constrained environment like a smartphone or other mobile device, you don't want 2 batteries. You don't want to have 2 cells that require some redundant hardware and other things like that. You want to have one single cell in your battery. We see this. I like to liken it to what happened with the iPhone X, where the iPhone X was also kind of pushing boundaries in a couple areas, and it was what I would consider to be a slightly less mature device. Still a great device, but not terribly mature. And it had two cells. Its battery was 2 cells right next to each other. And sure enough, its sequel that we got this year, it ends up looking a lot like the its predecessor, but that battery has uh, one single cell, and as a result, it is just a little bit more mature. They're able to fit a little bit more battery in there and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So, Dylan, I think we've talked a lot about some of the advantages of a Galaxy Fold style uh, device versus a Mate X style device. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so as we move forward into the future and we look forward, what do we think they're definitely going to clear up on? So with the Galaxy Fold, I think they'll definitely be able to increase that screen to body ratio on that exterior screen, the one that faces to the outside world. I think they would be able to slim up that notch or side notch that they currently have on the interior fold. And with the Mate X, I think they'll be able to improve that, not have a clear line when you're folded and unfolded. Have it fold perfectly flat. Maybe make that screen a little more scratch resistant, because that's the biggest flaw with it, in my opinion. Make the hinge less fragile. Are there any other major improvements that you think these two devices could do?
I think you've covered them. It's still admittedly uncertain which style will eventually dominate the folding device landscape. It's going to be exciting to see more and more folding devices pop up and mature and eventually find themselves in our pockets. So thank you guys. It's been a great podcast.